Nice. So I like to know, like, why do you think atheism is irrational? Just so you know, I'm not an atheist. I'm agnostic myself, but I'm
Okay.
curious about your view on atheism.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. I believe atheism is irrational because it makes knowledge impossible. Any kind of worldview where you don't have God, and specifically when I say God, I mean the God of Christianity, the God presented in the Bible, knowledge becomes completely impossible.
Like, why does knowledge become impossible when there's no Christian God?
Yes, because the Christian God has what are called the preconditions of intelligibility. And so God, the God that's presented to us in Scripture, is the only God who would make it capable for us to have knowledge. And I'll kind of explain why that is. You see, if you don't have a God who is all knowing, then any God or any kind of system of revealing truth to you is going to be fallible. And there's always new information that can come along and disprove what you thought you knew. So, in other words, let's just take a basic atheist standpoint or epistemology where they believe that knowledge is gained by learning from scientists or philosophers. Well, philosophers can be wrong about things because they're not all knowing. So, you never can have sure knowledge. And when I say knowledge, I mean absolute certainty. You can never have certainty in any area in your life because there can always be new information that can come along and disprove what you always thought you knew. Any God, and if you have some other kind of deity that you believe in, if he's not all knowing, then you have the problem of him revealing things to you that also in the same way, new information can come along and disprove it. The God would also, or either God or whatever system of knowledge you have, you also would have to have the 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 incapable. It had to be incapable for whatever system of knowledge you have of being deceived. So anything that reveals knowledge to you, you have to make sure that it has no way of telling you a lie. So if there's any way that whatever is revealing this knowledge to you can deceive you, then that also makes it impossible for you to be able to have knowledge. So the two characteristics of God, the God in Scripture, is that He's all knowing and He's incapable of lying. We would also have to be agents that were made for the specific thing, for the specific purpose of knowing things. And so God has made us as agents of revelation. He's made us to know him. And that's the reason why we are made. Any other system like evolution or something like that, you wouldn't be able to have that kind of assurance because you weren't actually made to have knowledge. You may think you have knowledge, but if evolution is a system that produced your brain, then you're produced by a system that doesn't have knowledge on the forefront, but instead has mechanisms that are geared towards things like survival. And so you could never know for sure if the things you believe are true, if what is gearing you or what created you is something that's geared towards survival and not truth or not knowledge. Does that make any sense?
Yes, your argument is absolutely right. I couldn't disagree more with you. But one single problem I have with it, just because we do not have absolute truth, that doesn't mean that we don't have uh, truth at all, like to any degree. We do have, from a atheism standpoint, we do have proof. It's just not absolute proof.
Well, I would say even that statement there, I have proof wouldn't be able to be justified. So you wouldn't even be able to know if you really did have truth or really did have proof because anything that you consider to be truth would be something that could be debated, something that you can find out later that you're wrong about. So even the thing, it would be a like even if you accidentally knew some things that were true, or if you thought you knew some things that were true that actually were true, you wouldn't be able to justify it and you wouldn't have assurance in it. So it's kind of futile. So it's kind of like just kind of a simple analogy. Let me think of one that kind of suits it. It's kind of like if you were, it's kind of like, okay, I have no idea if it's really true that there's $10 in your pocket, but I'm gonna, for all I know, a lot of people do have $10 in their pocket, so it's possible that you do, and so I'm going to count that as knowledge. And then lo and behold, you really do have $10 in your pocket. Did I really know that, or was it kind of just like a wild guess? Well, it's more of a wild guess, and it wouldn't be like a justified belief. It would be arbitrary, and that would be the same thing. Is if there's so many components about life that you don't know that lead you into blindness on all these things that you think you know, and then you kind of have some truth that you're holding on to, but you're not absolutely sure, you can't justify it. It would be the same way. If I can't justify the reason why I think you have $10 in your pocket, it's not counted as knowledge. I wouldn't consider that knowledge.
Yes, no, you wouldn't consider that absolute knowledge. You can call it knowledge. Like, uh, you know, just because we don't have the idea of unrefutable truth, that doesn't mean that it doesn't exist, and that also doesn't mean that truth doesn't exist. It exists. We just don't know for sure if what we know is the truth.
Right, right. Yeah, and I don't question that at all. I don't question. I mean, as a matter of fact, since I believe my worldview is true, I believe that that in order to try to be very consistent with your worldview, you have to say you know less than you really know because you feel like with your professed worldview, you have to say you don't really know things. But I feel this is part of the transcendental argument as well, that as Scripture says, all men do know God, and we prove it in the way that we live. And so many things that you live as if you know for sure, it's not because you just think you know them for sure, it's because you really do. But then when you try to combine that with your professed worldview, you see it doesn't add up. So you try to intellectually justify your professed worldview, and by doing that, you have to say that you don't really know things that you actually do know. So I do believe you have absolute knowledge in a lot of things, but it wouldn't coincide with your professed worldview. So then you have to kind of say, well, we don't really know these things, and I think you really do.
Yes, I understand it, but it doesn't make atheism irrational. It just makes the maybe knowledge system, if I can call it that, a little bit wacky to understand. Like, from an atheism standpoint, yes, you can never know the truth. You
What,
can.
what was so? Here's a very simple, just Google definition of irrational: lacking in logical and correct logical relation. So irrational defined as lacking in correct logical relation. And so when you don't have a logical relation between the things that you live out and then the things that you profess, I would say that's irrational. Because you're saying one thing with your rational mind and then you're living another way. It's kind of like if you were to say, well, I don't believe my hand is in front of my face. But then you keep waving and you're looking at your hand, you're doing all the things. Someone would say that's irrational because what's being professed from your mouth is not what you're actually living out. And so when I say one thing with my lips and then I live a different way, there's not a correct logical relation there. So that would be irrational. And I would say that's the same thing that the atheist does. They claim they can't really know anything, but then they live as if they know so many absolute things. They say that they don't believe in absolute morality, but then they live as if there's absolute morality. They speak out aggressively against other people's moral stances, and they get outraged when people do things that they feel are immoral. But yet, when they talk about morality, they always say, "Well, it's subjective." But they don't treat it as if they would treat every other subjective thing. Like, you don't go get mad at somebody who's eating tomatoes if you don't like tomatoes. You don't say, "Why are you eating tomatoes?" And no, stop that. You don't do that because you understand that really is just a preference. But that people can't do that when it comes to moral issues. And so it shows a lack of correct logical relation.
Okay, there you really have a point. So you're just trying to understand well what your point is. So you say atheism, they never know the absolute truth, so they cannot claim that there is no God. Is that what you're saying?
No, I'm saying their professed way of living, or their professed belief contradicts the way that they live. And so they say one thing, they say that we don't know anything for certain, but when you say that, it's automatically self-defeating. So when you say we can't never know anything, that's a knowledge claim in itself. So it's self-defeating. And self-defeating statements are irrational. Or so when you say, well, we just can't know anything, that's a knowledge claim. And that would be irrational. So you're automatically just contradicting yourself. And that would be just like me saying, I don't believe my hand is in my face, but yet my eyes are following
Oh,
me.
I understand. I understand. Sorry, I had to hear it twice to understand.
Uh-huh.
Yes. As I said, I'm not an atheist. I'm agnostic, but I do believe your argument is valid.
Thank you.
That would make atheism irrational. Yes.
Thank you for being consistent. It takes humility to be consistent and admit that. And this is why Christianity not only saves our souls, but it also saves us from the irrational life now. The Christian claim, the Christian worldview is a comprehensive, it's a full worldview, and it encompasses everything that we live. We when we wake up in the morning, we automatically move as if we have purpose and meaning, and we can't escape purpose and meaning. We can't escape absolute moral truths that we claim. And since we can't escape these things, the Christian worldview encompasses all these, and it actually grounds them. And so when we hold beliefs like the idea of logic, so logic is something that we all understand as being universal, immaterial, and unchanging. Well, any materialistic worldview can't ground a concept like that because the material world is in constant flux, change, and evolution. Things are always changing and expanding. The particles are moving about. Even things that we believe are solid are constantly moving. And so even a concept like logic can't be grounded in a worldview that's in evolution because these things would have to be evolving as well. And if your material brain is all there is, that is holding on to this immaterial, unchanging concept, then you have a problem. But that's grounded very easily in God because God is immaterial. He's also universal and unchanging. And so we're able to ground all the things that we already live out, and we're able to make sense of them and be comprehensive with our worldview.
Yes, I said I do agree with you on the views on atheism because I don't really think a lot about atheism, theism, and stuff like this. So I never really cared enough to question about it. But since I saw this live and I saw you were alone, I decided to see what you're saying. You can all every day you can learn something new. I didn't really think about atheism that much, so today I learned something new about it.
Well, I'm glad you came, and I would also say the same thing about the agnosticism, and the reason why is because agnosticism is essentially making the same claim that you don't know and you can't know. And then yet in the same way, you're still living with purpose. You're still living as if morality is real. And this is kind of like, I think the best way for me to analogize it is to say someone is telling you about gravity. And they tell you all the properties of gravity and what gravity does. They say, well, gravity, it makes, larger mass pull in smaller mass towards it with this gravitational field. And they can show it to you. They show you the gravity. They show you it working. And then because you have another concept that you've thought of maybe of there's a wind that blows smaller object towards larger objects. And so now you have a different idea that's going to explain the same phenomenon. And so whenever I show you gravity, you're like, oh no, that's not what you're calling gravity. That's actually the wind blowing that thing down. And I believe in this wind force. And so everything that I show you about gravity, you can explain in another way with this wind force that you believe in. And so when I tell you that, you know what, you actually know all about gravity, I'm not lying to you. I'm telling you the truth. I'm telling you, you actually already know gravity. You know everything about it. You're just renaming it and you're putting it into a different package. And so when the Christian tells the unbeliever that you already know God, we're telling you that all the things that you live out and understand and the way you live consistently with moral truths that you hold universally, with universal concepts like logic, which are immaterial, universal and unchanging. All these things are parts are revelation from God, and you're appealing to His world every day. When you recognize beauty in the world, well, when you recognize beauty, it's as if that beauty was intended to be beautiful for you. You don't think in your mind like, oh well, I know it's not really beautiful. No, you accept it as if it was made to be beautiful, and as if you were being made to recognize beauty. And so you're actually interacting with God, and you know God, but you're just giving Him different labels. And this is what people do. They have all of what God gives them, and then they relabel it, and they find different ways of explaining His revelation. Does that make sense?
I do think it makes sense. I have one singular problem with your argument. So I want to know what you're referring to exactly. So, like you say, because we use things like logic that are immaterial. That means that we basically use basically depend on the idea of a god.
Yeah. We're depending on something that only God could justify, or only God could couch. We can only couch or justify something like that within God, because within any other world, it wouldn't make sense. Because as I said, a materialistic world. If you believe like logic is nothing more than your brain chemicals going off, well, it wouldn't make sense, because the chemicals going off in your brain are not the same chemicals going off in my brain. They're not reacting in exactly the same way. None of these things. So it has to be immaterial. What logic is, the essence of logic is immaterial. Do you know anything about Plato?
You know you mean the philosopher?
Yes.
No, I'm not really informed on philosophers.
Oh, okay. Well, just a quick one thing that he, pretty much his whole hypothesis about life was that there is a immaterial realm called the Platonic realm, and that is the ultimate realm. And so what he believes about, the allegory of the caves. Have you ever heard of the allegory of the cave?
Can you repeat?
Of the allegory of the cave?
No.
Okay, well, I'll kind of briefly run it by you. So, what Plato said about the allegory of the cave is, so you have two people who are in a dark cave, and there's a fire behind them, and I'm kind of paraphrasing. I haven't actually read it, but I've heard it said. So, there's a dark cave, and there's a fire behind them, and there's somebody that comes and does like puppet shows for them every day. And they grew up in this cave, and this cave is all they know. So their whole life is about looking at these puppet shows that are shown by whoever's behind them doing this fire. And then one day, one of the men is unchained, because they were chained down in this cave. One day, one of the guys is unchained. And when he gets unchained, he leaves out the cave and he sees the whole world. He's like, whoa, I thought this was the real world. He thought the real world was the cave he's been living in. So he sees the whole world. And when he comes back in the cave to tell his friend kills him. I'm sorry, he unalives him. And so, but the point of the allegory of the cave was Plato was pointing to the Platonic realm, and that he was saying that what we see in this physical realm is nothing more than a outworking of the true world, the true world being the realm of the form. I mean, not the forms. Yeah, well, yeah, the forms, the Platonic realm is pretty much is mind that gives way to matter and not the opposite way around. And so, and it's kind of like we already understand that with like computer programming. Before you have if you want to make a video game, there's an immaterial thought in your mind, and then you put it into code, and then before it even manifests, there's invisible things that precede. It's the mind and thought that precedes the actual physical, and we see that in things like DNA and all this, but this is, and Plato had no idea about DNA, but he just was able to philosophize about this thing. He was like, well, there has to be a realm of absolutes. And so he brought up these concepts of like duckness. He's like, because how do we conceptualize of duckness? Like when you see one duck, that's an individual duck. You understand that. But the world is more than just particulars. You have a concept of duckness and of what ducks are. And these things can seem kind of crazy to think about, but when you really think about it, it's just like, well, what exactly? Because if you're just going to be consistent with individualism, you'd have to say each individual duck is just a different thing. But even using that concept of duck, it points to a concept that is universal, that isn't just the particulars. And so you have the realm of the forms and you have the realm of the particulars. And he's saying the ultimate realm or the ultimate reality is actually the realm of the forms. These are the absolute unchanging things that give birth to everything else. Does that make any sense?
Yes. So can I start with with the logic, the
Sure.
first thing?
Yeah, sure.
So uh, logic is a concept, right? Created by humans.
Well, I don't believe logic requires a mind. See, the problem with saying that it's created by humans, because if we created logic, that means we could have created it differently, correct?
Not really create, but discover, I can say.
That exactly,
Yes.
and that's more accurate to reality, because these things are, because if we created it, then they wouldn't be absolute. We wouldn't be able to have truth or any of these things. And so there's actually a way that things are, and so what logic is the way God thinks. And as I believe it was Galileo who said that we are thinking God's thoughts after Him. We're created in God's image, and thinking correctly is to think as the Creator does, and that's what would be logical.
Well, I do want to ask, like, why do you believe in that? Like, what makes you think that?
Well, it's really the only way to ground things. So, like for one, the transcendental argument is that knowledge is impossible without God, and we can see why. As I went down that road with you, how knowledge would break down on any other worldview, and then the only option is to say, well, either God does exist or we can't know things. And to say that we can't know things is already self-defeating. And so anything that's self-defeating already has to be thrown out. It can't be true because it's just impossible. It's self-defeating. To say we can't know anything would be something that we knew. It destroys all types of language. We know that we know. I know that the word I'm saying right now has meaning, and I know it has meaning to you. And I know, and these are things that I know for certain, and you know them for certain as well. And so we do know things, but knowledge would be impossible in any worldview without God. And so we can couch these things and make sense of them. And this is how we have a comprehensive worldview. And so these are philosophical arguments and logical arguments. And so it's the impossibility of the contrary. That's what I believe.
I don't really have any objections with what you said. Yeah, I can't say anything, you know.
Well,
I'm gonna admit you are right here.
I respect your honesty and humility. I just always, I always like to tell people, how much do you know about Christianity?
Well, I don't really know a lot. What I do know some stuff. I told you I'm not really invested in the atheism, theism, or those type of stuff. So that's why I kind of choose the middle ground. You know, agnosticism, agnosticism, and I'm not really informed on
Okay.
religion-based stuff.
Well, this would be my advice to you. There's nothing more important than this topic. Drill in, and I can give you some resources if you want to add me. Any kind of questions you have, whether it's about the age of the earth, any kind of thing that kind of irks you or seems fishy, I can point you to apologists who are highly accredited PhD scientists. If you're into science or if you're into philosophy, I can point you to a few people. But there's nothing more important than your existence and why you exist and where you came from and where you're going after this. So, the- you know, just think how futile it is to worry about what you're going to eat tomorrow and all those things when eternity is held in the balance. You know what I mean? Of course, you're gonna make sure you eat and things like that. But there's nothing more important than where you actually came from. Just take a moment and think about how how complex this world is. I mean, we're literally on a huge floating rock that's held is almost a perfect circle that's floating around a fireball. Perfect.
Okay, can I make a little objection? We're not really floating because we're into space and there's no air.
Right. Well, you know what I mean. I mean, even if something is being held by forces, it's still floating. Yeah, you know what I mean. It's just, yeah. I'm not being precise with the language, but I mean it's extended in space. So when I say floating, I mean it's extended in space. There's nothing. It's not laying on anything. It's being held by gravitational forces. And so, and so, just think about the amazing complexity of the solar system, of the fact that we're in this Goldilocks zone to where life can be here. Think about the beauty of peacocks, and think about the beauty of things like the zebra and the ladybug, and think about the metamorphosis of the butterfly, and think about the complexity of DNA. Just really take your time and think about these things, and just ask yourself, in all honesty, why it is anything? I think it was Descartes that asked the question: why does anything exist except besides nothing? Why does something exist instead of nothing? That's one of the deepest questions that you can ask. And then think about the way you live your life. You live your life as if there are moral truths, as if logic is something that is true and binding in all places and everywhere, and it's this immaterial concept. Think about these things and think about what actually makes more sense out of your existence. Do you live more like an atheist, or do you live more like a Christian?
Okay, so just not really off topic, you mentioned it earlier. You know, I do believe there could be a God, but I'm not really sure about Christian God because I have some maybe I misunderstood. I told you I'm not really informed, so I would like to ask a few questions about Christianity if
Sure.
you're willing to answer, so I can clarify some things.
Sure.
So the first thing that threw me off was the creation, of everything said
Right.
in 7 days.
Yes.
What you, I think you do know that everything was not made in 7 days.
No, it's quite the opposite. Things were created in 7 days. Yes, and so what you'll see. So, what evidence would you say leads you to think that the world wasn't created in 7 days?
So you know, the earth used to be like very chaotic and not have really any. It took the earth a lot of time to gain water, vegetation, life. It didn't just appear in a few days.
So is that observation? There's two kinds of science. You have historical science, and then you have practical everyday science, which is done in real time. There's forensic science, and then you have practical science, and some of them are high confidence science, and then you have low confidence science. Science is high confidence science is things that are repeatable, testable, and have eyewitnesses, things like these. So high confidence science is things that we actually observe and we have observed. Do you think anyone observed the world coming into existence?
No, but we do have not really proof, but evidence. If you know, like the difference between proof and evidence,
Yeah.
that so just I just want something clarified. The process from Earth becoming like a ball of fire to
Right.
a planet full of life, did it take a few days in the Bible?
No, it never happened at all. So that whole thing that whole theory is based upon another theory. And so all these theories of how the world may have came into being, they touch you with great confidence. But you have to remember they don't actually have the confidence that they're espousing. They're all based on fundamental assumptions. And so the fundamental assumptions that are assumed when they're doing their science is that the world and the universe all have a naturalistic cause. And the only reason why they have this assumption is because of evidence that doesn't give them that kind of leeway. They're taking way more than they can. And so it was Fred Hoyle who saw the red shift and saw that the universe was expanding. But from the expansion of the universe, you don't have that the universe started at an infinitesimally small ball of energy. You don't have that from that. All you have is that the universe is expanding. And the Bible actually explains that exact same phenomenon. But God says very clearly in his word that he created the world mature in a way that actually answers a lot of the questions that we have, because the problem is you can't have proteins without DNA, and you can't have DNA without proteins. This chicken and egg problem is all over the world. It's in all of creation. This chicken and egg problem is in everywhere. What evolved first, the heart or the lung? We can go over and over with all these things. How
One,
what's
one
that?
objection. So what you say proves God, right? But I don't think it proves the Christian God, if you know what I mean. It proves an all-powerful, all-knowing God, but it doesn't prove a specific God.
So here's the thing. It has to be the Christian God, because this is the only God that we actually have revelation of.
Well,
And-
how do we know that it is a God that we don't know about? Like, how can we be sure that this all-powerful, all-knowing God is the Christian God and not a God we don't know about?
Well, I would say even that came away. Even that came, but like that goes against even just like basic thinking. So it's just like think about a God creating us and then not revealing who we are. But yet he gives us the concept of thinking, gives us the concept of words and all these type of things. And so we have the concept of being able to figure things out, investigate. We have the concept of words. It would be obvious. That's what sets us apart from other creatures, is that we're able to conceptualize these immaterial concepts into words, and we're able to communicate. So it's obvious that we have this ability for some reason, and it's something that's intrinsic in creation, that you see everything kind of has this purpose. So everything is purpose driven. Like you see bees, they're doing something. They had to be programmed to what they do, because their purpose goes outside of just themselves. Because them taking care of themselves also takes care of the flowers, which also takes care of and it spreads out. Everything spreads out, and it's not something that's just localized. It goes into everything, and so you would have to cut that off when it came to our rational ability to understand words, to be able to read, and to worship. And so worship is something that's intrinsic to all human beings. Everyone does it everywhere, and we've been doing it. And so what's the purpose of worship? Why would God give us this intrinsic thing that we just can't shake, just like everything else, just like logic, just like morality? Another big part of us being human is the ability to worship. And so what would be the purpose of that if God didn't reveal himself? So there needs to be revelation to ground the purpose of our being able to rationalize, read words, and worship. These things have to be grounded as well.
Let me think about it. That's something very deep. Deci